Hey there, I'm Serafina Vaughn. You know, I thought loyalty, hard work, and sacrifice meant something, especially when it came to family. I built an empire. I saved our family business from bankruptcy. And just when I thought I had secured my place, my father looked me in the eye and said, "It's your sister's now." No recognition, no gratitude, just betrayal wrapped in a $50 bill tossed onto the table like a tip for a waitress. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? They had been planning my downfall for years. They stole my work, erased my name, and when I fought back, they tried to destroy me completely. The Vaughn family dining room was the picture of elegance: pristine white linens, polished silverware, and a chandelier casting its golden glow over the mahogany table. The scent of seared steak and red wine filled the air, a contrast to the growing tension settling in my chest. I had been here 1,000 times before, in this very seat, listening to my father speak with the authority of a man who had built an empire from the ground up. But tonight felt different. Margaret, my mother, sat in silence, her eyes darting toward me every few moments before quickly turning away. Celeste, my younger sister, exuded the same effortless confidence she always did. Her silk dress draped perfectly, her manicured fingers circling the rim of her wineglass. And then there was my father, Dominic Vaughn, the man I had idolized for most of my life, the man I had nearly destroyed myself trying to impress. As the conversation flowed around business updates and upcoming mergers, I waited. This was it, the moment he would finally acknowledge me, the moment he would recognize what I had done. I had saved Vaughn Enterprises. When our logistics division was on the verge of collapse, when our outdated systems were hemorrhaging money, I had built the software that turned everything around. I had spent years working tirelessly, rewriting algorithms, optimizing data flows, burning through sleepless nights to craft the very system that catapulted us back to the top. And tonight, I would finally hear the words I had been waiting for. Dominic set his knife down, his movements deliberate. "Serafina," he said, his voice even, controlled. "I want to thank you for all the work you've done for the company. Truly, you've been invaluable in restructuring our tech operations." A swell of pride rose in my chest. "But leadership," he continued, "is about more than technical brilliance. It's about presence, vision, the ability to command a room and inspire people. And that's why, moving forward, Celeste will be taking over as CEO of Vaughn Enterprises." The words hit like a punch to the gut. I blinked, certain I had misheard him. Celeste? I glanced at my sister, expecting to see the same surprise reflected in her expression, but all I saw was a slow, knowing smile as she took another sip of wine. My voice was steady, but my hands clenched beneath the table. "Excuse me?" My father sighed, as if he were explaining something simple to a child. "You'll still have an important role in the company, of course, but—" "No." My voice cut through the air, sharper than I intended. "No, I built the system that saved us. Without it, without me, this company wouldn't even be standing right now." He chuckled. Actually chuckled. Celeste set her glass down, finally deigning to speak. "Serafina, don't be dramatic. You're great at what you do, but running a company is different. Some of us are just born for leadership." I felt the heat rise to my face. I turned back to my father. "Tell me this is a joke." Dominic exhaled, shaking his head. Then, as if it were the most casual thing in the world, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and tossed something onto the table. A crumpled $50 bill. "For your effort," he said simply. I stared at the money, my entire world tilting. Years of sacrifice. Years of pouring my soul into this company, into his legacy. The late nights, the missed holidays, the exhaustion. The belief that if I just worked hard enough, he would finally see me. $50. Celeste let out a soft chuckle. "Oh, come on, Sarah. You're overreacting." I turned to my mother, searching her face for any sign of protest. Any sign that she would speak up for me. But she didn't. She just lowered her gaze to her plate. Something inside me broke. Slowly, I picked up the bill, turning it over between my fingers. Then, with careful precision, I folded it into my napkin, placed it beside my untouched plate, and stood. Dominic sighed again. "Serafina, don't be—" "I'm not being dramatic," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I'm excusing myself." Celeste smirked, her amusement barely contained. Margaret opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I simply walked out, my heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving behind everything I had spent my entire life trying to earn. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I walked into Vaughn Enterprises, ready to reclaim my place, but my name was already gone. The lobby hummed with the usual morning chaos. Assistants rushed by with coffee trays, executives murmured over last-minute reports, and the front desk phone rang in a steady rhythm. But something was off. I could feel it before I even reached the elevator. Eyes flickered toward me, then quickly away. Conversations hushed as I passed, replaced by the artificial click of heels against polished floors. I squared my shoulders. It didn't matter. Last night had been a mistake, a misunderstanding. My father had always been ruthless in business, but even he had to see reason. The doors to the executive floor slid open with a soft chime, and I stepped out, expecting the familiar sight of my office at the end of the hallway. Instead, I was met with a name I didn't recognize. The glass panel that once read Serafina Vaughn, Chief Technology Officer, had been replaced. My title, my identity, erased overnight. A cold weight settled in my stomach as I pushed open the door. The room was almost unrecognizable. My desk was gone. My computer, my files, every trace of my presence, vanished. The space had been rearranged, sleek and minimalistic, with a designer handbag perched on the polished wood. And sitting behind that desk, flipping idly through a stack of documents, was Celeste. She looked up with an easy smile, her posture relaxed, her fingers drumming against the armrest. "Good morning, Serafina. Didn't Dad tell you? This is my office now." I didn't move, didn't speak. My brain struggled to process the words. Celeste let out a soft laugh. "Oh, don't look so surprised. You knew this was coming, didn't you?" My voice came out quiet, but firm. "What's my position now?" She tilted her head, pretending to consider. That's a good question. Maybe something in IT support? You were always good with computers." Rage burned in my chest, hot and suffocating. I clenched my fists at my sides. "I built the system that saved this company. Without me, you'd have nothing." Celeste leaned forward, her smirk widening. "Yes, but you see, we own the rights to that system now, and we don't need you anymore." The air thickened. The walls of the office felt smaller, closing in. I barely heard the footsteps approaching behind me until a hesitant voice broke the silence. "Miss Vaughn?" I turned. A security guard, someone I vaguely recognized from the lower floors, stood there, shifting uncomfortably. He avoided my eyes as he spoke again. "I was told to escort you out." The final blow. I glanced at Celeste one last time, but she was already reaching for her phone, attention elsewhere, as if I was nothing more than an interruption in her morning routine. Everything I had built, gone. Everyone I had trusted, silent. I took a slow breath and turned toward the exit. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a scene, no pleading, no arguing. I walked out with my head high, past the rows of employees who wouldn't even meet my gaze. Past the walls that once held my late-night work sessions, my triumphs, my sacrifices. The cold morning air hit my skin as I stepped outside, my breath fogging in the chill. I looked up at the towering building, the empire my father had built, the empire I had saved, and I made a promise to myself. If they didn't want me in their empire, I would build my own, and I would burn theirs to the ground. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been planned for years. The weight of realization pressed against my chest as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered career. Legal documents lay sprawled across the coffee table, their dense paragraphs blurring together under the dim glow of a single lamp. Empty coffee cups and unopened takeout containers lined the counter, evidence of days spent locked in my own head, replaying everything over and over. The moment my father tossed that $50 bill onto the table, the way Celeste smirked as she took my office, the hushed whispers in the hallway when I walked through Vaughn Enterprises for the last time. But it wasn't until now, sitting in the wreckage, that I understood the full extent of their betrayal. They hadn't just pushed me out. They had erased me. I sifted through the stack of legal documents my lawyer had sent over that morning, scanning the words again, though I already knew what they said. Vaughn Enterprises had filed for full ownership of my software months before I was removed. The contracts were airtight. Somehow they had transferred everything into their control without me noticing. A sick feeling curled in my stomach as I flipped through the paperwork. My name wasn't on the patents anymore. Celeste's was. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't an overnight decision. It wasn't some impulsive power grab. They had been planning this. A memory surfaced, hazy but clear enough to make my hands tremble. It was 2 years ago. I was in my father's office, exhausted from working another 60-hour week, reviewing system updates with him when he slid a stack of papers toward me. "Just standard agreements," he had said, his tone almost dismissive. "We're making a few structural changes, but nothing that affects you directly. Sign where I've marked." And I had, without reading them. My stomach twisted with self-loathing. They had stolen my work in broad daylight, and I had handed it to them. Anger surged, hot and consuming. I grabbed my phone, fingers numb as I dialed my father's number. He picked up on the third ring. "Serafina." His voice was unreadable, smooth as ever. "You stole my software." My voice shook, but not with fear. With rage. He sighed, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Business is business. You were careless." I gritted my teeth. "You took my life's work and gave it to Celeste. Don't you feel even a little ashamed?" He chuckled, the sound cold and cutting. "Serafina, it's done. Move on." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Then I ended the call. My heart pounded as I turned back to the papers, my father's words ringing in my ears. "Move on!" That was his final dismissal, his last effortless rejection. I grabbed the nearest stack of contracts and threw them against the wall. Pages scattered across the floor, my breath coming in sharp bursts. I had been blind. I had trusted them. Never again. A strange calm settled over me as I straightened. The fury was still there, burning steady beneath my skin, but it wasn't chaotic anymore. It was focused. They thought they'd taken everything. They forgot. I'm the one who built it in the first place. I knew there was no turning back. If I wanted revenge, I had to build something bigger, stronger, untouchable. The weight of that decision settled over me as I sat in a quiet cafe, my fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Across from me, my mother stirred her tea absently, her gaze avoiding mine. I had asked her to meet me here for one reason, to hear the truth. "You knew," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You knew what they were doing to me." Margaret Vaughn exhaled, setting her spoon down with a soft clink. "Your father. He always had a different vision, Serafina. He never saw you as the one to lead Vaughn Enterprises." I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. "I saved that company, and he gave it to Celeste like I was nothing." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I wanted to stop it," she whispered, eyes filled with something dangerously close to regret. "But Dominic, once he makes up his mind, there's no changing it. A lifetime of knowing this woman, of seeing her stand by a man who crushed anything he couldn't control, and still, a part of me had hoped she would choose me." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "If you're not with me, then don't expect to be part of what comes next." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. And in that silence, I knew. I was truly alone in this fight. I stood, dropping a few bills on the table, before walking out into the cold Chicago air. Alone, but not broken. That night, I started reaching out. To the people who mattered. The ones Vaughn Enterprises had discarded, just like they had discarded me. Matthias Reed, our former CFO, who had kept the company afloat in its worst years before being pushed out when Celeste brought in one of her useless networking friends. Vera Holt, a data analyst who had built the company's predictive models from the ground up, only to be let go when she questioned Celeste's reckless spending. Cassian Ford, the lead engineer who had helped me design my software, the only other person who truly understood its intricacies. We met in the back room of a small cafe, far from Vaughn Enterprises and its long-reaching influence. The air was thick with unspoken frustration, with old wounds that had never healed. Matthias leaned forward, his expression sharp. "We know what Celeste is doing to the company. The question is, what's your next move?" I met each of their gazes. "We build something better. We build something they can't touch." Cassian smirked, nodding. "They own your old code, but they don't own your mind." For the first time in weeks, a flicker of something close to hope ignited in my chest. We spent the next several hours sketching out the foundation of what would become Nova Systems. A new generation of logistics software. Faster, smarter, completely independent of Vaughn Enterprises' outdated model. But the biggest challenge wasn't the technology. It was the funding. Matthias leaned back, rubbing his chin. "We need investors, and I know just the people Celeste pissed off." I exhaled, staring down at the scribbled plans in front of me. This was my second chance. They had taken everything from me, but in return, they had given me a reason to fight. That night, I stood outside Vaughn Enterprises one last time. The towering building loomed over me, the name glowing against the night sky. But for the first time, I felt nothing. I whispered to myself, "I don't need your empire. I'll build my own." Celeste thought she had won. She had no idea. She just started a war. It didn't take long for Vaughn Enterprises to start crumbling under Celeste's reign. And I was just getting started. The first signs were subtle. A few whispered conversations among former clients, vague reports about internal restructuring. But then Matthias slid a folder across the table toward me, and I saw the truth in black and white. "Vaughn Enterprises is hemorrhaging clients," he said, his tone even, though I could see the satisfaction behind his eyes. "They lost 3 major contracts this quarter alone." I flipped through the pages, my pulse steady. The numbers didn't lie. Vaughn Enterprises' projected revenue had taken a steep dive, and the biggest blow? One of their longest-standing clients had just signed with Nova Systems. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the table. "It's starting." Inside Vaughn Enterprises, chaos had already begun to spread. Senior executives, people who had been with the company for years, were handing in their resignations. Celeste, of course, refused to see the problem. "This is just a temporary setback," she told the board, dismissing concerns with a wave of her hand. "We're restructuring. They'll come crawling back." But not everyone was as blind. Nathan Wolfe, one of my father's longest-serving legal advisors, finally broke his silence. "Dominic, your daughter is running this company into the ground." I could almost picture the look on my father's face when those words hit him, but he still defended her. "She'll figure it out," he said. "She just needs time." Time wasn't something Celeste had, and I made sure of that. It was at a high-profile tech event when our paths finally crossed again. I wasn't there for the spectacle, but for the strategy, to make sure the right people knew that Nova Systems was the future. Celeste, on the other hand, walked in like she still ruled the world, draped in designer confidence. When she spotted me, her lips curled into a smirk. "Still playing in the minor leagues, sister?" she taunted, swirling the champagne in her glass. I met her gaze without flinching. "I don't need to. Your empire is crumbling." Her smirk faltered for just a second, but Celeste never backed down easily. "You should start preparing for failure," I said, voice cold and certain. "It's coming faster than you think." She let out a laugh, shaking her head. "We'll see who wins, little sister." Then she turned, walking away as if she had nothing to worry about. She thought she was invincible. She had no idea she was already standing on a sinking ship. Celeste's desperation would only grow, and desperate people make reckless decisions. I knew she wouldn't sit back and watch as Nova Systems thrived while Vaughn Enterprises crumbled. She had spent her life believing she was entitled to success, convinced that her name alone guaranteed her victory. But the world was starting to see what I had always known. Celeste was nothing without people like me cleaning up her mess. And now, there was no one left to save her. I woke up to a notification flood on my phone. News alerts, emails, frantic messages from Matthias. Something was wrong. When I saw the headline, I felt the anger settle deep in my chest. Nova Systems under investigation. CEO accused of fraud. The article was worse than I expected. It claimed Nova Systems had built its foundation on stolen intellectual property from Vaughn Enterprises. Anonymous sources suggested my entire company was operating on technology that wasn't mine. That I wasn't the visionary behind it, but a thief. A calculated hit. I knew exactly who was behind it. My hands tightened around my phone as I read through the article, breaking down each lie for what it was. Celeste was playing dirty, but she had underestimated me. Later that day, Vaughn Enterprises called a last-minute press conference. The media swarmed their headquarters, eager to get the latest on what was being called one of the most shocking corporate betrayals in recent years. And Celeste, standing in front of the cameras, relished every second of it. "Nova Systems," she said, her voice smooth and rehearsed, "is built on ideas that do not belong to Serafina Vaughn. My sister's company is profiting from proprietary software that she had no right to take." I stood at the back of the crowded room, unseen, but I heard every word. "We are calling for an official investigation," she continued, glancing at the reporters like she had already won. "We will ensure that justice is served." She was playing the perfect role, the wronged CEO, the victim of a supposed betrayal. The media ate it up. I could have stayed quiet. I could have let the press cycle run its course, but I never let Celeste have the last word. I stepped forward, and the moment I did, the room shifted. Reporters turned, murmurs spread. Celeste's carefully maintained expression faltered. I met her gaze as I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking against the marble floor. She recovered quickly, plastering on a fake smile. "Well, look who decided to join us." I took my time picking up the microphone, making sure the room was silent before I spoke. "You think you can erase me?" My voice was steady, sharp. "I'm still here." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. That was all I needed. That night, I met with my PR team. The battle had officially begun. "We fight back," Matthias said. "We expose them." He pulled up a list of every move Celeste had made since taking over Vaughn Enterprises. The reckless spending, the poor leadership, the backroom deals that were already starting to turn on her. "She wants a war?" I exhaled, already formulating our response. "Then let's give her one." Within 24 hours, Nova Systems released a counterstatement. We didn't just deny the accusations. We proved them false. We exposed Vaughn Enterprises' plummeting revenue, the contracts they lost due to mismanagement. Then we launched a social media campaign, highlighting Celeste's failures. The response was immediate. Articles started to shift from attacking me to questioning her. Investors, already wary of Vaughn Enterprises' decline, pulled further away. Celeste had taken the first shot. Now, it was my turn to fire back. The betrayal that came next wasn't from my sister. It was from someone I once trusted. I arrived at Nova Systems that morning, expecting a routine meeting. Instead, I walked into a war zone. Matthias was waiting for me outside the conference room, his expression tense. He barely let me set my bag down before speaking. "We have a leak." His words were sharp, cutting through the morning like a blade. I stilled. "What do you mean?" He handed me a printed document, our new product designs. The same ones we had locked behind security measures, protected by encrypted networks, shared only with my most trusted employees. And yet, this is in Vaughn Enterprises' hands. For the first time in weeks, my heart truly stopped. I snatched the papers, flipping through them as if I could undo what had already happened. This was confidential information. No one outside of my inner circle should have had access to this. I looked up. "Who?" Matthias exhaled, jaw tightening. "We checked security footage. It's Jason." Jason Carter. My fingers curled around the documents as the realization settled into my bones. Jason had been one of the first people to stand by me when I left Vaughn Enterprises. He had been there when Nova Systems was nothing more than an idea, offering support, promising loyalty. I had trusted him, and now he had given everything to Celeste. A memory surfaced. Jason and I sitting in a cramped cafe, months ago, when I first approached him about joining Nova Systems. He had laughed, shaking his head. "You've got guts, Serafina. Taking on Vaughn Enterprises head-on?" "I don't have a choice," I had replied. I had thought he understood. I had thought he was on my side. But I was wrong. Now, I stared at the security footage playing on Matthias's screen. Jason slipping a flash drive into his pocket before leaving the office late at night. The truth hit like ice in my veins. "He wasn't my friend," I murmured. "He was always Celeste's spy." I didn't wait. I found Jason. He was arrogant enough to still be in Chicago, meeting with investors, acting as if he hadn't just sold me out. I walked straight into his office, shutting the door behind me before he even had the chance to react. He barely looked guilty. If anything, he looked amused. "You've been busy," I said, voice dangerously calm. Jason smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I had a better offer." I held his gaze. "Why?" He shrugged. "You think you're untouchable? Celeste made me an offer I couldn't refuse." I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel betrayed. I just felt cold. Jason thought he had played me. But I wasn't finished yet. I left without another word, my mind already calculating the next move. Back at Nova Systems, I gathered Matthias and the team. "We fight back," I said, voice steady. "And we win." Celeste thought she had stolen something valuable. She thought she had gutted my company from the inside. So I let her believe it. We planted false data. We let Jason take back fake product blueprints, flawed, unstable technology designed to fail in real-world application. Celeste took the bait instantly. Within days, Vaughn Enterprises announced their newest breakthrough, technology they had supposedly developed in secret. In reality, it was my trap. They rushed the product into production, eager to beat Nova Systems to market, and it failed, spectacularly. Investors pulled out. The media turned on Celeste. Vaughn Enterprises took another massive hit, and I watched from a distance, smiling. "Betrayal cuts deep," I murmured, "but I make sure it cuts both ways." Celeste thought she had outmaneuvered me. Instead, she walked straight into my trap. But when people are desperate, they don't back down. They double down. And Celeste was about to make her most reckless move yet. Vaughn Enterprises was unraveling. The company my father had built, the empire I had saved, was now days away from total collapse. Investors were pulling out. The stock price had plunged so low that financial analysts had already started calling it a lost cause. Clients were abandoning ship, refusing to renew contracts. The damage was too severe, too deep. Nathan Wolfe, the company's lead legal counsel, had been loyal to my father for years, but even he could see the writing on the wall. "We're out of options," he told Celeste during an emergency board meeting. "There's nothing left to salvage." But Celeste didn't believe in reality. She refused to see the cracks forming beneath her feet. "This isn't over," she snapped. slamming a stack of documents onto the table. "We just need to be more aggressive. We need a new strategy." Nathan leaned back, unimpressed. "Celeste, this is over. The company is broke. No amount of spin is going to fix that." She glared at him, as if sheer willpower could change the truth. But it couldn't. I had made sure of that. So when Celeste walked into my office at Nova Systems later that evening, I wasn't surprised. But I was amused. She was a shadow of the woman who had once stolen my company, my title, my future. The smug arrogance was gone. Her designer dress was still impeccable, but there was an unmistakable tension in her face. For the first time, Celeste looked tired. She dropped into the chair across from my desk and exhaled slowly. "You have to stop this, Serafina." I leaned back, watching her carefully. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to beg. I tilted my head. "Stop what?" She let out a humorless laugh. "You know what? You've won. Vaughn Enterprises is finished. Just let it go." I didn't move, didn't blink. "No, Celeste," I said quietly. "You lost." She flinched. For years I had imagined this moment. I had dreamed of watching her break. And yet, as I sat across from her, I felt nothing. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I was just trying to survive," she muttered. "You don't understand what it's like to be in my position. To have—" I held up a hand. "Don't." Her mouth snapped shut. "You made your choice, Celeste," I said, my voice calm. "Now live with it." She stared at me, her lips pressing into a tight line. Then, without another word, she stood and walked out. And I thought that was the end. I was wrong. An hour later, my attorney burst into my office. "Vaughn Enterprises just filed a lawsuit against you," she said, breathless. "It's from Dominic." My pulse remained steady. "For what?" "He's trying to block Nova Systems from acquiring any of Vaughn's remaining assets. He's claiming that you signed contracts years ago that still bind you to Vaughn Enterprises." I exhaled slowly. Dominic Vaughn. Even at the very end, he still clung to his delusion of control. I knew exactly what contracts he was referring to, the same ones he had tricked me into signing years ago when I was still naive enough to trust him. The ones that had stolen my software from me. I could fight this in court, drag it out, spend years entangled in legal battles with a company that was already dead. Or I could end this, right now. The next morning, I made my final move. Instead of fighting Dominic's lawsuit, I bought out Vaughn Enterprises' remaining debt. I didn't just defeat them, I owned them. Legally, I forced Vaughn Enterprises into liquidation. It was over. That evening, I received one last phone call from my father. His voice was tight, controlled. "You're destroying your own family name." I let a beat of silence stretch between us. Then, quietly, I said, "No." "You did that a long time ago." And then I hung up. The name Vaughn Enterprises would disappear forever. And I was the one who made it happen. But even as I stood victorious, the past had one final truth to reveal. I walked through what was left of Vaughn Enterprises, my footsteps echoing in the hollowed-out space, the once grand lobby, where high-profile deals had been made, where executives had whispered about market domination, was now empty. The sleek black and gold logo that had once stood as a symbol of my father's empire was being stripped from the walls, the letters unceremoniously taken down, piece by piece. The company was gone. I should have felt something, vindication, satisfaction, even regret. But as I stood there, watching the last remnants of Vaughn Enterprises disappear, I felt only finality. It was over. A few days later, an envelope arrived at my office. No return address, just my name, written in familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, aged at the edges, the ink slightly smudged. Dominic Vaughn's handwriting. "Serafina, you were always the one who deserved it." But I was too proud to admit it. I never truly believed Celeste was the right choice. I knew you were stronger, smarter, capable of building something greater than Vaughn Enterprises could ever be. But I also knew that as long as I held you here, under my roof, under my control, you'd never become the woman you were meant to be. So I let you go the only way I knew how. I pushed you. I wanted you to prove me wrong, and you did. Maybe one day you'll understand. Dominic. I stared at the letter, my fingers tightening around the edges. This wasn't an apology. This wasn't a plea for forgiveness. This was justification. Even at the end, my father believed he had orchestrated everything, that his cruelty, his betrayal, had somehow been a lesson. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. I wouldn't burn it. I wouldn't frame it. It would sit there, forgotten, just like the man who wrote it. A few days later, I met them, Dominic and Celeste. One last time. It was strange seeing them like this. My father, once an unshakable force in the business world, now looked small. His once pristine suit hung loosely on him, his face aged beyond his years. Celeste sat beside him, her usual arrogance dulled, though she still held herself high, as if pretending she was still untouchable. But we all knew the truth. They had lost. Celeste exhaled, crossing her arms. "Are you happy now, Serafina?" Her voice was hollow, edged with resentment. I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "I didn't destroy you. You did that to yourselves." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, but she said nothing. Dominic cleared his throat. "We could rebuild," he said, as if the past year had never happened. As if he could erase the war between us with just those words. We could start over, together. I didn't hesitate. No. A flicker of something, defeat, crossed his face. "Some things," I said quietly, "are meant to end." And with that, I turned and walked away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back. A week later, I stood at the top of Nova Systems headquarters, watching the city stretch out before me. This company, this empire, was mine. Not stolen, not gifted, not handed down. Built. By me. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. As I stand here today, looking at everything I've built, I realize something important. Power isn't given, it's taken. Respect isn't handed to you. You earn it. And sometimes, the best thing that can happen is being forced to walk away from something that was never meant for you. This journey wasn't just about winning a corporate war. It was about proving that self-worth isn't defined by family approval or past failures. It's about knowing your own value, even when the world tries to diminish it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No one can take away what you create with your own hands. They might steal your ideas, betray your trust, or try to rewrite history, but as long as you keep moving forward, they will never own your future. So, to anyone watching who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told they weren't good enough, don't let them decide your story. The people who try to bury you forget one thing. You are the seed. What do you think? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to walk away to find your true power? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this video resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another powerful story. The best is yet to come.
After 7 in the evening, having finished today's work, I headed straight home from the office. Lately, it's been a daily routine for me to head straight home like a homing pigeon as soon as work ends. Our home, which we bought as a newly built house 10 years ago, has become my sanctuary. I used to often grab a drink with colleagues after work, over drinking and coming home late, which led to being scolded by my wife, Susan. That wife is no longer here. She passed away from cancer 2 years ago. She was just 42 years old. Since then, I started coming straight home. My name is Mike. As I approached the front gate, I heard laughter from inside the house. My son, a 7th grader, my daughter in 4th grade, and Susan's sister Jessica were inside. In these 2 years since they lost their mother, Jessica has played a big part in making sure the kids haven't felt too lonely and recently helped bring back their smiles. Jessica, who divorced 3 years ago, had moved back to her parents' house about a 10-minute walk from ours. Since Susan's passing, she has been visiting us every day, helping with cooking, cleaning, and laundry, taking care of us, me and the children. What was all the commotion about? I could hear loud laughter all the way outside. As I walked into the living room, taking off my suit jacket, Jessica immediately came over to me and apologized. "I'm sorry, I should have come out to greet you," she said, taking the jacket from me to put it away. Because when I asked T to whistle, she couldn't make a sound and made funny faces trying, my daughter said, clutching the belt of my trousers. Then she urged me to whistle as well. Me? I can't blow. I tried, but couldn't do it properly. Even after the kids retreated to their rooms, Jessica didn't leave. She began mending the children's clothes using the sewing machine Susan had bought. "It's silly doing this nowadays, isn't it? We could just buy new ones," I said, checking on her. "But I want to do something for them," Jessica said, picking up my coat with holes in it, which I was already going to throw away. "Look, this one too." I watched her with mixed feelings. "Nice sewing machine. Is it one of the newer models?" I asked. "Yes, probably," I replied. "Susan bought it because she thought even she, who wasn't good at sewing, could use it with this," she said. She could mend various things, but soon after the sewing machine arrived, Susan fell and never got to use it herself. It was during our son's school sports day. Our son came last in the 100-meter run. He joined us, shoulders slumped in disappointment, as we waited with lunch prepared. I teased him about coming in last and laughed. He sulked. Jessica then said, smiling, "Coming in last is still a kind of first place, isn't it? If you count from the back." Our son nodded vigorously, perked up, and bit into the sandwich Jessica offered him. I'd exchanged glances with Jessica, who was smiling warmly as I grinned at our unfazed son. "Susan, your sister Jessica is indeed remarkable," I murmured to my late wife Susan in my mind. Another year passed. Jessica continued to come to our home and became almost like a mother figure to our children. Then came the 3rd anniversary of Susan's death. I was summoned to the family home over there by Susan's father, my father-in-law. Jessica was there too. My father-in-law used to be the CEO of a publicly traded company, so the house he lived in was quite impressive. Once I was led into the living room, my mother-in-law, who brought in some tea, spoke a few words to me and then quickly left the room. The father-in-law, sitting in front of me, had a serious expression quite different from his usual casual attitude. The tense atmosphere had me on edge, wondering what was going on. "Mike, it's been 3 years since Susan passed away, hasn't it?" "Yes, time flies," I replied. My father-in-law nodded in silence. "I've been depending on Jessica ever since, and I feel so guilty for relying on her so much," I said, bowing my head. My father-in-law leaned forward. "Is Jessica of any help at all?" I honestly replied that not only was she helping, she'd had taken over all the household chores, and it was all thanks to her that the kids hadn't felt lonely. "And you, what do you think of Jessica?" he asked. "I'm, of course, grateful. No matter how much I thank her, it doesn't seem enough. Just grateful, huh?" I was at a loss for words, unable to grasp the meaning of his words. "So, are you willing to accept it?" "What?" I was taken aback by his unexpected words. Then my father-in-law added, "Will you marry Jessica?" This time, I was too surprised to speak. He once again confirmed that I didn't have a girlfriend. "Won't you consider it?" he said. It was fine if I didn't answer right away. He mentioned that both of us were not young. She's already in her mid-40s, and I'm almost 50. We're not strangers to each other, so why not be together? This was absolutely shocking to me, but my mind was made up from the start. There wasn't a shred of doubt. Jessica is Jessica. She is my wife's younger sister, my sister-in-law. That will never change. However, I hesitated to answer immediately and postponed my reply to my father-in-law. But then an unexpected situation arose. I was diagnosed with cancer during the company's health checkup. It was like I was seeing everything go black, thinking that after my wife, now it was my turn. However, after a detailed examination, the doctors assured me it was in the very early stages and it would definitely be cured. So, I was hospitalized for about 10 days. On the first day of hospitalization, when Jessica, who had come to accompany me, was decorating my bedside table with flowers, I told her about the marriage proposal from her father. I was shocked. It's Jessica and me, you know. Is that so? She shrugged her shoulders and lowered her head. I was thinking about how to refuse while being hospitalized. I don't know if the timing is good or bad, but when I jokingly mentioned it, she bowed deeply and apologized. I'm sorry. It's not something you need to apologize for, Jessica, I told her. She shook her head. If I had endured more and not divorced, even my father. It was her father who had introduced her to her ex-husband. He was an employee at the company he valued, and Jessica had met him several times before deciding that she could marry him. However, once they started their married life, it became apparent that his intentions were to win over his father-in-law, who was the CEO. He often left home and had a bad reputation among women. Moreover, he acted irresponsibly in the company, taking advantage of his position as the CEO's son-in-law. My father was deceived by him too. After the divorce, he apologized to her when she returned to her parents' home. So, I think my father feels guilty towards me. That's why he made such a request to you. I too had vaguely heard not-so-good things about Jessica's ex-husband. I can understand your father's feelings, but a relationship between you and me is out of the question. When I blurted this out, she turned to me resolutely. Exactly. You're absolutely right. I'll convey this to my father. Yeah, no, but wait. I'll say it myself when things settle down. I was the one who had received the consultation from my father-in-law. I thought it was proper for me to respond myself. The day of discharge arrived. Jessica had offered to come to help, but I politely declined. Having nothing to do during my hospitalization, I spent the day lost in thought. I wondered if my indulgence with Jessica was the reason my father-in-law had come up with such an absurd idea. Therefore, I decided it was best to gradually distance myself from Jessica. I took a taxi from the hospital to my home. I called Jessica on the way. It's all right. You don't need to be here tonight. I'll order some pizza, the kids' favorite, as a celebration for my discharge. When I conveyed this, she quietly responded, Understood. That night, as I had told her, while delivering pizza for dinner, I asked my children if anything had changed at home while I was hospitalized. We were totally fine even without you, Dad. Really? Even my daughter nodded yes in agreement. So, I burst into laughter with the kids. I could tell that both my son and my daughter were genuinely happy that I had returned safely. However, Auntie was acting a bit strange, my daughter mentioned, as if she just remembered. When I asked how strange, it turned out she had been drinking alcohol in the kitchen while preparing dinner. My daughter agreed. As far as I knew, Jessica was not exactly a heavy drinker, and she never actively chose to drink. I didn't know what had happened to Jessica, but I had an intuition it had something to do with the marriage talk between her and me that my father-in-law had brought up. The next day, I contacted my father-in-law as soon as I could. He too had something he wanted to talk to me about. I heard it from Jessica. She wants you to stop worrying unnecessarily. She's concerned you are troubled because of me. Even though I had asked her to keep it a secret, she had spoken to my father-in-law. He apologized, wishing the talks of marriage with her had never happened. I was more worried about Jessica, so I told him what I heard from the kids. Eventually, I must have pressured Jessica about marriage not once but twice. She was drowning her sorrows with liquor because of this. My father-in-law told me not to worry anymore because he had called off the marriage proposal with me. I requested him to convey to Jessica that she doesn't need to visit us every day as before. My father-in-law, agreeing, hesitated a bit before starting. Actually, this was about 6 months before my wife Susan passed away. When work finished earlier than planned, he visited Susan and they were left alone. "Hey, Dad, I have a favor to ask." Susan apparently approached him. She had a request regarding me and the kids for after she was gone. He tried to encourage her, telling her not to be faint-hearted, but it seemed that she had come to terms with the fact that she didn't have much longer to live. "After I'm gone, Dad, could you mediate between my family and Jessica?" He was dumbfounded by Susan's words. However, Susan continued, lying on her bed, gazing at the ceiling. She could entrust the kids to her younger sister Jessica with peace of mind. Indeed, the kids had warmed up to Jessica, who often visited us. He was at a loss for words. He could have just agreed to soothe his suffering daughter, but he couldn't do that. To him, Susan nearing the end of her life and Jessica seeking new happiness were both his daughters. He couldn't casually agree without considering Jessica's feelings. While he was lost for words, Susan spoke again. "Also, it seems Jessica likes him, and not in a strange way," she said. According to Susan, Jessica often said this before she got divorced. How she wished her husband was a man like me. How she wanted to marry a man like me. He fumbled for words to respond to Susan. Then Susan, with a smile, said to him, "If he finds someone he loves, I'm fine with it. But it's still painful. I'm not that magnanimous. But if it's Jessica, maybe I can accept it." In the end, the discussion about marrying Jessica originated from my late wife, Susan. I felt infuriated after parting with my father-in-law, at him, at Jessica, and most of all at my deceased wife, Susan. I returned home with this rage. The moment I got back home, my daughter came to me and started fussing. "Auntie isn't coming. I'm hungry," clinging to me. I handed some money to my son and told them to go eat whatever they liked. Then I went to the back room unconsciously and stood before the sewing machine Susan had bought. She bought it saying that even though she was bad at sewing, this machine would allow her to mend things. What is there to mend? In a fit of rage, I picked up the sewing machine and threw it against the wall with all my strength. I collapsed on the spot as all my strength drained away, and I cried. The next Sunday, that day, the sky was clear from the morning. I decided to have a barbecue in the yard with the kids. The three of us went to the supermarket for groceries. When we were coming back, reaching our house, Jessica was standing at the gate. Seeing her, my daughter ran towards her immediately. My son stayed beside me, looking shy and awkward. "I'm here," she said in a soft voice. I nodded and invited her inside. The kids were absorbed in the barbecue. Jessica and I sat on the porch watching them. It was a typical Sunday afternoon scene, one you could find in any home. "I spoke to your father." She nodded affirmatively. "Did you know too, Jessica, about what Susan was thinking?" When I asked, she shook her head in denial. Then she rushed to where the children were absorbed in grilling the barbecue. In the meantime, I brought a can of beer from the kitchen refrigerator. I intended to bring one just for me, but brought one more for her. "Hey, don't grill everything at once. Your aunt and I are going to take it slow." I called out to the kids and sat back on the porch. Jessica placed some grilled barbecue on a small plate beside me. I eyed the plate and offered her the can of beer in return. "Thank you, but I'll pass on the alcohol." "It's fine. Have some. It goes well with the barbecue. It's surely delicious." She accepted the can of beer I insisted on, and we both opened the pull tabs at the same time. "I didn't start coming here because someone asked me to," She began to talk before sipping the beer. It was her own will to visit us. She always admired and idealized our family. She thought she could have it someday, but divorce made that dream impossible. I wanted a family like yours, she continued with a sigh. So I went to your house just to fill the hole in my heart after my divorce. Just for myself, she said, and gulped down the beer. After that, she visited our house several times a month and helped with household chores and the kids. But we rarely had the chance to meet in person. Strangely, the feeling of loneliness started to grow in my heart when I couldn't meet her. That's right. You said this would patch up various things. In front of the sewing machine, left thrown against the wall in anger the other night, I talked to my wife, Susan. Like mending with this sewing machine, were you trying to patch up the hole that could appear in me and the kids after you were gone? There's no need for such worry anymore. I bowed my head with gratitude towards the sewing machine lying against the wall and to my wife, who I believed was watching over somewhere. Then I plucked up the courage and called her, and I thanked Jessica again for all the time she had spent filling in for Susan, who had passed away. But let's stop this, all right. Such things. Why? Am I a bother? She uttered in a flat voice. No, it's not that. So first off, let's drop the brother, okay. She fell silent. I'll stop calling you Jessica too. Let's start with Jess at first. So can you call me by my first name too? While I was nervously waiting for her reply, she responded, all right, Mike. Is it okay for a man over 50 like me to still want these things? Her voice asking me to try just one more time shook my self-control. My name is Daniel. As a single father, I raised my son, who is now 25. Before I knew it, I turned 55. It's been 10 years since my wife, Michelle, passed away. The memories of those days are still vivid in my mind. Michelle complained of feeling bloated, and although I thought it was nothing serious, I encouraged her to visit the hospital. However, the diagnosis was pancreatic cancer with only 1 month to live. I couldn't believe it. After all, my wife looked healthy right before me. Michelle and our son, Andrew, panicked about the sudden news. That's when I decided to take some time off from work. I'm a carpenter. I plunged into this world right after graduating from high school. At the time, I was working on building a new house commissioned by an architect I was close with. When I explained the situation, both the architect and the client readily agreed to delay the construction period for the month. Until Michelle passed away, I devoted myself to caring for her at home, fully supporting Andrew as well. I made sure to live those days without any regrets. It was the most intense month of my life. After she passed away, and I was organizing her belongings, I found a drawer filled with numerous letters. There were letters prepared for Andrew to receive each year until he turned 20, titled, Dear Andrew. Dear 16-year-old Andrew. Dear 17-year-old Andrew. And even one for when he gets married, titled, Dear Andrew on his wedding day. I found a letter addressed to me as well. I carefully opened the envelope and read it. The list included age-specific gifts she wanted to give Andrew for his birthdays, his favorite recipes, and mine. It even detailed instructions on how to perform various household tasks. How has she written so much without me noticing? After receiving her terminal diagnosis, she was energetic for about a week, but then quickly deteriorated. Perhaps the weak pen pressure in some places was from when she wasn't feeling well. Imagining Michelle writing these letters in pain brought tears to my eyes. On the last page, it was written, Dear Daniel, after I settle in heaven, fall in love again. Nurture love with someone else. I look forward to discussing your wonderful qualities with that person in heaven. I cried. It had been a while since the funeral, but I had never cried until then. I felt it was unmanly, and somehow, tears just wouldn't come. But upon reading this letter, I cried. It was probably the most I had ever cried in my life. I couldn't imagine feeling up for romance at all. That letter felt like a final farewell, and I kept it hidden deep in the drawer. Even when I opened the drawer to check what to give Andrew for his birthday, I made sure not to look at that last letter. It's been 10 years since then. Even now, at 55, I don't feel like getting into a relationship. Andrew, now 25, still lives at home. I've suggested countless times that he should consider living on his own. But Dad, I'm getting married, he suddenly announced one day. Despite all my urging for him to move out, the thought of him actually leaving felt lonely. Whether he knew how melancholic I felt or not, he cheerfully shared his news. She's a bit older than me, but she's beautiful. It was love at first sight at a mixer, and I really pursued her. When can I bring her over? He seemed a bit shy, yet visibly happy. I could tell he had found a good partner as the corners of my eyes crinkled with a smile. My work schedule is flexible, so I can make time whenever needed. When I told him to let me know of a convenient day, he quickly left. He mentioned he was going on a date. Is today okay? He asked, but I advised against it since neither I nor his partner were probably ready and sent him off on his date. Really, he has grown into a man who lacks consideration, but I raised him, so maybe it can't be helped. Speaking of which, I remembered there was a gift Michelle wanted to give him for his wedding. For the first time in a long while, I rummaged through the drawer. I hadn't opened the drawer for 5 years since the letters were meant to be given to him only until he turned 20. As I was searching through the drawer, a piece of paper fluttered down. A glimpse of Dear Daniel caught my eye. It was the last page of that letter. The letter that was supposed to be at the bottom of the drawer had fallen out. It was as if it was insisting on something. What could it be? Laughing off the sudden feeling, I put the letter back deep in the drawer. 1 week after Andrew announced his engagement, he brought his fiancée to meet me. I am Jessica. Nice to meet you. The woman who looked me straight in the eye was 28, 3 years older than Andrew. It seems you were nervous too, Daniel. Taken aback by her comment, I was momentarily confused. Turning to Andrew, I noticed he was frowning. Dad, your shirt is inside out. Ah, shoot. As I scrambled, Jessica burst out laughing. That's it. I can't handle it. I love how funny you are, Daniel. Her saying, I love you, caught me off guard. This girl, she reminds me of someone. Especially her smiling face that looked like someone, but who was it? Lately, these things don't come to mind easily. I don't know much about recent pop stars or actresses, but she must look like some celebrity. Deciding to blame it on my age, I stopped trying to figure out who Jessica resembled. She seems like a fine young lady, I thought as I watched Jessica and Andrew leave through the front door. I spoke to Michelle's photo. Michelle, don't you think Andrew has caught a fine woman? She was very classy. We're going to meet her parents soon. I'll make sure not to wear my shirt inside out then. They say we're going to eat French food. Remember we went just once? The napkins and all those knives were quite a hassle. Her mother is a single mom too. It's good. It would have been hard to face both of them alone. I talked aimlessly and then stood up. It felt like Michelle was smiling a little. On the day of the meal, I checked my shirt carefully and headed to the restaurant in my suit. Andrew was also in a suit, and Jessica wore a beautiful dress. Jessica, who had been checking her mobile phone, turned to me with an apologetic look. I'm sorry, my mother will be a little late due to work. She wants us to go in first, she said, so we decided to enter the restaurant. The table was set beautifully, with a cream-colored tablecloth, dishes, cutlery, and napkins all neatly arranged. Just seeing this made me a bit nervous. Uncharacteristically, I had studied up on the internet. The napkin, I remembered, goes like this on my lap. As I was about to pick up the napkin, a small shriek from Jessica made me jump. Hey, what are you doing? Looking up. I saw Andrew picking up the finger bowl, about to drink the water. But he didn't even understand what he was being scolded for. It seems I should have made Andrew brush up on his manners. That's not drinking water. Look, this is how you wash your fingers, she instructed briskly. I was suddenly reminded of my high school days. I was often scolded like that too, by a girl who was the class rep and my first girlfriend. Back then, I was planning to go straight into carpentry instead of pursuing further education, so I was quite the troublemaker. I fell for a girl who wasn't afraid to scold me whenever I acted up. Initially, she was my nemesis, but somehow we ended up dating. All right, she confessed to me. She said she couldn't just leave me be. I never expected a class rep to fall for me, so it was quite a surprise and a delight. Come to think of it, Jessica's way of scolding is a bit like how she used to scold. Now that I think about it, even her face. Wait, what was her name? As I pondered this, a woman appeared, saying, "Sorry, I'm late." The face I had just been remembering, now slightly marked by wrinkles, seemed like a doppelganger of the woman in my mind, and I couldn't help but exclaim, could it be? Then I recalled the class rep's name and said it out loud, Nicole. The woman widened her eyes and looked at me intently. Apparently, she didn't remember right away. It's me, Daniel. Remember from high school. As I began to explain, realization dawned on her face. What, Daniel? No way. She seemed hesitant to continue, so I took over. I've grown a bit, haven't I? I laughed heartily. Nicole blushed. Sorry, well, not so much getting fat as becoming more robust. She didn't forget to put a positive spin on it. That's right, she was always like that. You two know each other. We had left the main subjects of the meeting, our children, behind. As I pondered how to explain, Nicole boldly declared, we were classmates in high school. Actually, we dated back then. The children were visibly shocked by her revelation. I hadn't expected her to disclose that we dated, and it flustered me a bit. As if anticipating my disarray, Nicole blurted out, there's no point hiding it. Isn't it a miracle? Our children, who we dated in high school, are getting married to each other. She seemed a bit excited. Understandably so, I was excited too. Actually, I was still feeling quite surreal. What are the odds? The conversation flowed freely from then on, and time flew by quickly. Before we knew it, we had finished dessert. Initially, the focus was on the children. I described Andrew as a bit of a show-off, a troublemaker like me, and so carefree that he wouldn't even bother to prepare for occasions like this. Nicole, while being glared at by Jessica, happily talked about how Jessica was so serious and responsible that she never thought she would get married, but was delighted that she could marry such a wonderful person. Then the conversation turned to us. Nicole knew my wife had passed away, as she had heard it from Jessica. She consoled me, acknowledging how difficult it must have been to lose my wife during Andrew's sensitive teenage years, and how hard it surely was. Nicole mentioned that she had divorced her husband due to personality differences when Jessica was in elementary school. Her ex-husband quickly remarried, but she had been too busy raising Jessica alone to think about her own relationships, remaining single since then. As we were deep in conversation, I noticed the kids watching us. They seemed to be smirking a bit. They look good together, don't they? Andrew commented, looking at Jessica. To which Jessica jokingly replied, why don't they just date then? Don't tease us. I glared at them, but Nicole just looked relaxed. Oh, come on, it's fine. You've become so rigid, she teased. It felt like the roles of the class rep and the mischievous boy had reversed. Despite being a single mother, Nicole had aged gracefully. After chatting for a while longer, we parted ways. I had put on weight, but she hadn't changed much. She usually wears suits for work, and they really look sharp on her. While thinking about this, Andrew and I were walking home. He teased again, didn't it seem like there was a good vibe? At my age, what good vibe could there possibly be? I retorted sharply, but he continued teasing. Hey, could something happen between you two? Furthermore, he added, "Why did you guys break up? It seemed fine." Oh, if you had stayed together, would I not have been born? I decided to ignore that comment. Why did we break up? Ah, that's right. Nicole went to college, and I pursued carpentry. We ended up in a long-distance relationship, and our lifestyles were so different that we mutually agreed to part ways. We had been together for just over a year, starting when we were seniors in high school. As I pondered this, he cheerfully mentioned, "We'll be seeing each other a lot during the wedding preparations, so good luck." Should parents even be this involved in wedding planning? In my time, it was mostly just the couple doing the preparations, but times might have changed. I didn't mind meeting her, though. Indeed, we ended up seeing each other frequently at the planning meetings. Whether or not dresses and tuxedos suited them was one thing, but choosing the color and type of paper for the invitation seemed trivial to me. However, Nicole, holding an invitation envelope, excitedly remarked, "Oh, this green is lovely. This one's cute too, but pink might be too much for Andrew, don't you think? What do you think, Daniel?" Caught in the spotlight, I pointed to the pink envelopes she favored. "Wow, Dad, that's your taste," he exclaimed. Such matters should be left to the preferences of women. I'd have to give him a proper talk about that later. "You probably reacted the same way when you were young, didn't you, Daniel?" she said playfully, giving me an upward glance. "I wonder if it's a testament to your wife's education," thoughtfully, Nicole said. It seems Nicole had easily figured out that I was accommodating her preferences. Being so involved in the wedding venue felt somewhat uncomfortable, though. Andrew insisted, and I reluctantly accompanied him. These minor exchanges were somewhat enjoyable. Once we get married, should all four of us live together? It sounds like it could be fun. After the color of the invitations was decided and the planner left, leaving just the four of us, Jessica dropped this bombshell. I blushed deeply and denied it outright. Nicole was laughing. Could it be that she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea? If we could laugh together like this, maybe remarriage wasn't such a bad idea. But surely, it was unthinkable for the parents of the children getting married to each other to also marry. Nicole may have aged beautifully, but I had become more robust due to my job, complete with a beer belly. I found myself daydreaming about a life with Nicole, only to dismiss the thought almost immediately. Though it was a bit exhausting, the thrill of our enjoyable conversation lingered as Andrew and I returned home. The house felt unusually cold and bleak. Perhaps it was a backlash from the happy feelings I had just experienced. One photo frame in the living room caught my eye. I realized I hadn't spoken to Michelle in a while. I stared blankly at her photo. The dust-covered frame felt like a blow to my head, proof of my recent neglect. I picked up her photo and wiped off the dust. "Sorry about this, letting so much dust gather," I said softly. Of course, there was no reply from her. What was I getting so carried away about, thinking about romance at this point? "I'd be doing you wrong, wouldn't I?" I muttered again. There was a noise from behind. I wondered if Andrew had overheard my disheartened voice. After that, I started making excuses to avoid going to the planning meetings I was invited to. Although work was a bit busier, I simply didn't feel like attending. Nicole, with whom I had exchanged contact details, occasionally sent me messages to check in with the results of the planning meetings. However, I ignored those messages too. A grown man indulging in romance seemed undignified. Yes, I feared that if I kept meeting Nicole, I wouldn't be able to stop my feelings. I didn't deserve to face Michelle. To dispel my feelings for Nicole, I polished the photo frame until it sparkled. Then, a few months later, the day of Andrew and Jessica's wedding arrived. Since I hadn't replied to Nicole's messages, it felt awkward to face her, so I just exchanged brief greetings and then paced restlessly in the lobby, striking up idle conversations with relatives on the groom's side. As the reception began, things got busy. I toasted with guests and made small talk. Nicole was doing the same. Somehow, I felt relieved that there was some distance between us, because Nicole looked breathtakingly beautiful in her finery. Standing next to her, it felt like my heart might just jump out. The reception proceeded smoothly, and as the atmosphere settled, a spotlight suddenly shone on me. Andrew and Jessica, the bride and groom, looked at me with surprised expressions. I had arranged a surprise with the planner. Thank you all for being here today. Now, I would like to read a letter from my wife in heaven addressed to Andrew and Jessica. As I spoke into the microphone, he stared at me wide-eyed. Dear Andrew, congratulations on your wedding. Dear the bride Jessica, thank you for marrying Andrew. I filled in the blank where it was written to the bride and read it aloud. This was the last letter Michelle had written before she passed away. Have you learned to eat eggplants? You used to hate. I read, and laughter spilled from Andrew's friends. He still hates eggplants. I continued reading the letter impassively to avoid getting choked up with tears. Soft sobbing could be heard around the venue. This reception I am watching from the sky. I am so happy to see you looking incredibly joyful. May you both be happy forever. Take good care of Jessica. With that, I folded the letter, concluding the emotional moment. I was fidgety, partly because of this, until I finished reading Michelle's letter. I felt barely alive after completing this important task. I let out a huge sigh of relief. Andrew was teary-eyed, but looked at me and grinned mischievously. What was that SCE smile about? As I started to feel less dense and more aware of my surroundings, I noticed that the spotlight had shifted to Andrew. He then took the microphone in his hand. What was he planning to do with a microphone? As I wondered, he also took a letter, familiar pink stationery. It was the same kind of paper I was holding in my hand. Could it be from mother to father? I have a letter to read on her behalf, he announced, sending a shock through me as I stood there dazed. His lips curled into a mischievous grin. Actually, there are 2 letters. One for if the father had remarried, and one for if he hadn't. Since he hasn't remarried, I'll read this one, he said, and the room erupted in laughter. My brain was still trying to catch up. Dear Daniel, so you still haven't remarried? His dramatic shout prompted more laughter from the crowd. You were told to fall in love, but you're still the serious Daniel, aren't you? But see, Andrew is getting married and looks happy, right? I want you to find happiness too. Since Andrew is starting his own family, you should too, Daniel. And there was a pause before the next words. I look forward to the day in heaven when I can talk about your wonderful qualities with your new partner. Indeed, those were the words, the last words I had tucked away way deep in a drawer. I bawled my eyes out, unbecoming of my age, in front of many eyes. I couldn't stop sobbing while the MC cleverly filled up the gap with an ad-lib. I managed to compose myself, holding a handkerchief in one hand, influenced by my sobs. Andrew and Jessica, tears in their eyes, took the microphone and both began speaking simultaneously. Mom, Dad, Nicole and I exchanged surprised glances. We've decided to read a letter from both of us to both our parents. Andrew and Jessica began speaking in turns. I was quite the troublemaker, he confessed. His words sent a wave of laughter through the crowd. And I was the typical class rep, she added. This time laughter enveloped the bride's side of the room. Dad was a troublemaker too. The spotlight turned to me. I had a bad feeling about where this was heading. Mom was also a class rep. Nicole's eyes widened in surprise. I am forever grateful to my dad, who raised me alone. I am forever grateful to my mom, who raised me alone. Their words synchronized perfectly. And now I will be happy with Jessica, he added. I too will be happy with Andrew, she said. And so the two said together, please make sure Dad and Mom are also happy. I could tell that Nicole was shivering next to me. When I try to look at Nicole, Andrew suddenly shouts, Dad. Startled, I look straight at Andrew again. Talking with Mom in heaven, that must be Nicole's job. Hearing him shout that, I panic. Don't say such reckless things, You're making Nicole uncomfortable. As I say that, Jessica grabs the microphone. Mom, it's not so bad, right? Hearing her words, I finally look at Nicole, who has her face covered with her hands, blushing to her ears. Then Nicole's lips move. It's not something I should say in front of everyone. Nicole whispers to me in a voice so low that only I can hear. I know you care deeply for Michelle. Those words stir my heart, and they make me hopeful. Should I, a man over 50, still hope for such things? But shall we try it just one more time? Her whispered continuation shakes my self-control. Andrew and Jessica seem to hear it as they are both smiling broadly, trying not to look at their faces. I speak to Nicole. But it's not fair to Michelle or you. Barely squeezing out the words, Nicole, Chickles, silly, I'll probably get along famously with Michelle in heaven. After all, we have the same taste in men. Knocked out by her words, thinking about our children marrying and us marrying too, it's bizarre. Concerned about looking foolish in front of relatives, friends of our children, I let go of all such worries and embraced Nicole. I remember the first time I held her during high school. It was after she confessed her feelings to me. Just like that time, I made the same promise as I did in high school, to cherish her delicate and slender form. I will always be there for you, this time for sure. I added those words to my old vow. Years later, I'm pacing between the living room and the front door. Seeing me, Nicole sighs at Michelle's picture, exasperated. Can you see him? He can't settle down, she speaks to Michelle. You've met Annie at the hospital, right? What's got you so fidgety? A challenge, I retort. It's her first time coming to this house. Annie is our granddaughter. Nicole dismisses my argument with an okay, and sits down by the window. She gestures for me to come over. I obediently follow. Sitting and looking out at the garden, I see a small tree reaching up to the sky. Nicole and I planted it when we were married. Given our age, we don't have much time left. Feeling faint-hearted, I mentioned this to Nicole, who bought a sapling. Let's live long enough to see this tree grow taller than the house and then have a nice chat with Michelle. Her smile as she said this is dazzling, and I'm reminded of it every time I see this tree. It seems like it will take a while for that tree to reach the roof. Hearing that, Nicole says, let's make lots of memories in that time. Nicole rests her small head on my shoulder. I wrap my arm around her shoulders. I love this peaceful moment by the window. It feels like Michelle is laughing behind us. Just then, I hear the sound of a car engine. Oh, looks like they're here. It's probably Andrew and Jessica's car. They've come to visit, bringing our first grandchild. We need to greet them. Nicole and I exchange glances, stand up, and walk towards the entrance. Don't lay a finger on my wife. I won't let you touch her. I was kicked from behind by the department head, Michael, and fell flat on my face. At first, I didn't understand what had happened. Michael is supposed to be single. Still, I wonder what's going on in his head, claiming Hannah is his wife. Hannah gave him a presumptuous look, treating her as his wife. A disgusted look. If we don't stop his emotional runaway, the worst could happen. Why would I be your wife? I'm already married, Hannah exclaimed. Hannah is the daughter of Chairman Morgan, and she's my wife. But the last name is reluctantly. I began to explain to him in detail. My name is Tom Taylor. I'm a 42-year-old who works in the sales department of a multinational trading company. My main job is to import and export various goods, and our sales department can be considered the flagship of the company. Being able to speak foreign languages was a must for getting the job, since we deal a lot with overseas transactions. I'm especially grateful to my parents for this. My father is American, and my mother is Japanese. My father, who worked for a global trading company like I do now, moved us around various countries since I was young. That's why I can speak English, French, Spanish, and Japanese. I returned to the US when I was in the first year of high school and spent 3 years getting accustomed to American culture and customs. When it was time to go to college, I had many options but chose to attend a renowned state university in the US. Having spent much time abroad, I wanted to cherish my roots even more. I obtained US citizenship when I was 20. After graduating, wanting to work in a broader world, I joined a multinational trading company. I finally landed a job in sales, making the world my workplace. Time flies, and it has been about 20 years since then. Before I knew it, I had passed the age of 40. I often joke, shoot, I forgot to get married, which always gets a laugh. Don't forget the important things. It's not too late to start looking for someone to marry. Marriage is wonderful. You should experience the joy of having a family soon. Then Hannah Morgan joined our sales team. She had been working in a different field and had recently switched to our company. She has a bright smile and is quite beautiful without being pretentious. Her voice was also surprisingly charming. I often found myself enchanted by it. I was not the only one drawn to her charms. Sometimes I would ask what her previous job was, but she would lightly deflect the question, judging that it might be a sensitive issue. I didn't ask any further. As colleagues in the same department, we had many opportunities to work together. For me, who was attracted to her, seeing her every day at the company felt like a reward. Honestly, when we walked together, we definitely turned heads. I have mixed race features and I'm 6'2" feet tall. Hannah is also tall, about 5'7", and we look well matched when we walk side by side. Furthermore, with her almond-shaped eyes, she looks like she could be a model in Paris. It doesn't feel bad at all when people say we look great together. She seemed to feel the same way. At the time, I was 40 and she was 28. Both of us, despite not looking the part, were tentatively exploring our feelings. Then a major personnel change occurred, and Michael became the head of the sales department. He was 53, single. Before him, I had been the oldest and single guy in our department. But now, there was someone older. It's hard to say in a word whether he was competent or not. He has an impressive education, having graduated from Stanford University's doctoral program. However, whether he had climbed the ranks smoothly was questionable. Being 53 and just becoming a sales manager is not exactly a rapid promotion. We thought there might have been some issues and tried to avoid him outside of necessary work interactions. Gradually, the nature of the discomfort we vaguely felt became clear. He had what you might call a geeky personality. The reason he had remained single until 53 was probably due to his busy schedule. Following his favorite characters, to him, fictional women seemed to be more of romantic interests than real-life women. This was a world completely foreign to me, but Hannah showed some understanding. Some people are like that, she said. But I don't think it's right to view it as abnormal. Everyone has their hobbies and ways of living. Her understanding, unfortunately, backfired. Michael began to blatantly interfere with Hannah. You really get it, Hannah. No one else here understands me well. I'm not that familiar with it either, but anime and such are famous aspects of Japanese culture. And that's wonderful, she replied. Yes, exactly. It's Japanese culture, Hannah. It feels great when you support me with your cute voice. She probably realized her mistake. She gave a forced smile, trying to get through the awkward situation. However, he didn't think she was bothered at all. He kept approaching her for trivial tasks. Hannah, could you read this document out loud for me? I think I'll understand it better hearing it in your cute voice. The rest of us in the sales department felt this couldn't continue. We had to protect her somehow. Whenever he tried to approach her, we'd suddenly get in the way. Then, suddenly, I was assigned to work overseas in Singapore for 3 years. Everyone in the department was furious, suspecting Michael's hand in it. But as a company employee, I had to accept the personnel decision. Being separated from her for 3 years was the hardest part. That was when I first realized how seriously I cared for her. She cheered me up with her bright spirit. It's just a 19-hour flight. We can video call now, so we can see each other anytime, Hannah. Not 3 years. Just hold on for 2. I'll make a big impact and come back here soon. Okay, I'll wait. And Tom, don't you dare cheat. In the end, the transfer became a catalyst for us to express our feelings to each other. I made sure she wouldn't feel lonely and prepared thoroughly before departing for Singapore. Singapore is a vibrant country with a mix of many cultures. Living alone as a man, I don't really feel any inconvenience. Certainly, the temperature here is higher than in America, but those who like summer would enjoy it. Eager to return as soon as possible, I devote myself passionately to work. Whenever I can get Monday off in addition to the weekend, I hop on a plane to America to spend time with Hannah. She also uses her vacation days to come to Singapore. When she visits, we don't just stay in Singapore. We travel together to countries like the Philippines, Malaysia, and India. My stint in Singapore definitely deepened our bond. You never know what will trigger significant changes in life. Thus, I kept delivering results one after another at the Singapore branch. Moreover, all my deals involved the U.S. branch. This was all to ensure Thaddy wouldn't be transferred to another country's branch in the next personnel change. 2 years passed, and I was able to return to the U.S. branch 1 year early than planned. Hannah told me that not only she, but also the other sales staff were looking forward to my return. However, she said nothing in particular about what Michael thought. My modest hope that he might have been transferred to a different department during these 2 years was dashed. This is how I came to meet Michael again after 2 years. When I landed at the airport and stepped off the plane, I saw Hannah waving from beyond the gate. As I approached with my luggage, she came up with a bright smile and hugged me. "Welcome back, Tom. Are you heading straight to the office from here? I'd like to report back today. I can take it easy for the next few days since I'll have some days off." We held hands as we left the airport and got into a taxi. The scenery outside the window was all too familiar. Although I had returned several times during my assignment, I had always been out sightseeing with Hannah, so I was somewhat out of touch with the changes in New York. Holding her hand tightly, I asked about a concern that had been on my mind. Is Michael still the same? Has his attitude improved at all? Not at all. I didn't talk about it much because I didn't want to worry you while you were in Singapore, but he hasn't changed a bit. Now that I'm back, I won't let him pull any strange stunts anymore. I'm sorry you had to endure so much, Hannah said, resting her head on my shoulder, acting affectionately. I was happy and gently held her waist. As we were doing so, the taxi pulled up in front of the company. After paying the fare, we entered the building together. We took the elevator to the sales department on the 5th floor. As we got off the elevator, the familiar floor of the sales department came into view. "Tom, you're finally back." "Welcome back, Tom. We've been waiting for you," greeted with smiles by my colleagues. I smiled back. Suddenly, I was kicked in the back and fell face down. "Don't touch my wife. I won't let you lay a finger on her." It was Michael who had kicked me from behind. At first, I didn't understand what had happened. He was supposed to be single. Still, I wondered what was going on in his head, claiming Hannah as his wife. "Tom, are you okay?" "Michael, what are you doing? It's because he's getting too familiar with my wife." I got up on my hands and reassured Hannah. "I'm okay." Hannah gave Michael, who presumptuously treated her as his wife, a disgusted look. If we don't stop his emotional runaway, the worst could happen. Now that I was back, it was clear something had to be settled. Determined, Hannah confronted Michael with the truth. "Why would I be your wife, Michael? I'm already married." It must have been a shocking revelation for Michael. Sure enough, his voice cracked as he responded, "What? Married? What kind of joke is that?" Hannah is my wife. That's when I delivered another staggering fact. Hannah is the daughter of Chairman Morgan, and she is my wife. But her last name is... Reluctantly, I started to explain the situation to Michael in more detail. Indeed, her name is Taylor, and Hannah's maiden name was Morgan. However, she uses her maiden name at work because it's more convenient for professional purposes. On our marriage certificate, she is registered as Hannah Taylor. She then said, "Here's the proof," and pulled out her driver's license from her bag. Next to her photo on the license, it read, Hannah Taylor. Michael's eyes widened, his face a picture of disbelief. "When on earth did you get married?" I had no idea. "Oh, of course you didn't know. It was a secret. Plus, right after we got married, I was transferred to Singapore. We talked about going together, but Hannah stayed in the U.S. because she was worried about her father. Our decision to marry came after my transfer to Singapore was confirmed. The moment we knew we would have to live apart, our feelings solidified. That was when I first learned that Hannah was the daughter of our company's chairman, Mr. Morgan. One might assume that the chairman of a multinational company would be a foreigner, but I had heard that our company's chairman was American. Apparently, the founders were a duo, one American and one Japanese, and the American founder was Chairman Morgan's father. Because of such a background, Hannah was raised without any financial troubles. Her mother passed away when Hannah was young, and her father, Chairman George Morgan, raised her with great care. Having deep interactions with international figures, she grew to love the country and culture of her American roots. Since my parents lived abroad, the only people present at our first family meeting were me, Hannah, and George. I was relieved that he was pleased with our marriage. Apparently, George had suspected something about our relationship and had conducted a background check on me a little while ago. After the investigation confirmed my good reputation at work and my sincere approach to life, he felt comfortable entrusting his daughter to me hearing this. I was merely overwhelmed. We decided not to have a wedding ceremony. Hannah wanted to keep her identity as the chairman's daughter hidden at work and continue her job as before. We informed only a few close friends and asked them not to disclose it. She continued to use the Morgan surname and remained in the same sales department as me. Some people say that spouses should work in different departments, but we had been working together even before marriage, and it had helped us excel. We wanted to keep working together as a team. Thus, our married life began with me in Singapore and Hannah in America, living separately. However, it didn't feel like we were that far apart. We kept a video chat app open all the time while at home. Even if we didn't have anything particular to say, we streamed our living spaces to each other. Just seeing each other's relaxed forms and hearing each other's voices with the real ambient sounds was comforting. There was no need to always have something to talk about. Just sharing the present moment was important and brought us happiness. Listening to the explanation, Michael began to tremble. "It can't be my Hannah belonging to another man. I don't want to believe it. I've known Hannah much longer than you have." "What are you talking about? You only came to the sales department after Hannah had already transferred here, so we have known each other longer," I said. No, you don't know anything. I have known Hannah since before she started working here, from her previous job," he gasped. Indeed, she was always reluctant to talk about what she did before joining our company, and initially, I was curious, but eventually, it didn't matter much to me anymore. Hannah used to be the voice of Cutie Pink and the Pretty Squad Cuties for the longest time. I was a member of her fan club, and always made sure to get the front row seats at the voiced actor events, I said, taken aback. I could only gape in surprise. I never imagined that Hannah had been a voice actress, I admitted. Indeed, she has a very appealing voice that instantly makes people feel warmly towards her. Voice acting has become a glamorous profession nowadays, almost as popular as idols or celebrities. A female colleague exclaimed joyfully. "Anna is Cutie Pink. My daughter was a huge fan. She even has the doll. I did wonder why the show ended so abruptly when I decided to quit. There was talk of finding a replacement, but the opposition was so fierce that it was called off. I even received comments saying it was better to end the show than to change the voice, another colleague added. I get it. For fans who are truly in love with their two-dimensional heroines, it's like having a different person altogether, I said. I have no intention of criticizing. People have different ways of thinking, and as long as they don't bother anyone else with their lifestyle, there's no problem. But it was a different story when such an individual was causing actual trouble around them. I continued. When Hannah stepped down due to rage, I was devastated. I'd wondered what I would live for. But then, to meet her by chance at work, if that's not fate, I trailed off. This revelation made Michael's over-the-top behavior somewhat understandable. He was feeling sad because his favorite voice actor had retired, but then he was assigned to a department where that very idol worked. Even someone other than Michael would feel it was fate. Hannah looked embarrassed and looked down. I never meant to hide it. I just didn't want to be celebrated just for fun. When I switched jobs, my father told me to face my new job with resolve, so I left my past behind, she explained. Were you working under your real name? I asked. Of course, I was using a stage name, but my voice is distinctive, and Michael recognized me immediately. He attended every event and remembered me from the autograph sessions and photo shoots, she replied. It turns out she was quite the star. However, new talent constantly enters the voice acting industry, and even when participating in auditions, opportunities for newcomers with young and charming voices have increased. Thinking it was probably time for a change, Hannah consulted with her father and decided to start a second career at our company. I said, Hannah, it's not too late. Break up with that frivolous man and marry me. Then, you'll be my cutie pink forever, Michael pleaded. Stop saying creepy things, please, Hannah said firmly, turning pale and clinging to me for support. It seems a major problem had arisen in the sales department, as reported by someone from another department to the boss, I explained. Chairman Morgan entered the room, asking, What's all this commotion? I understand today is Tom's first day back, and some excitement is expected. But isn't this a bit much, Mr. Morgan? George apologized. I'm terribly sorry. I've just discovered that Hannah is your daughter. Just because you now know Hannah is my daughter, does that change your position in any way, Michael? Chairman Morgan asked. Upon hearing those words, Michael seemed to have made a big misunderstanding. He apparently thought that Hannah had feelings for him and had been reporting his excellence to George. Mr. Morgan, I've always loved Hannah, even from her voice acting days. I want to continue walking with her in life. Please accept our relationship, Michael declared. What are you talking about, young man? Hannah has been married to Tom for 2 years now. She is troubled by your actions. If you can't adjust your behavior, you will have to leave this company, Chairman Morgan stated firmly. Hannah, don't say such things. To think I love you this much. What a cruel thing to say. You're being deceived by Tom. It's not true love if you can stay apart for 2 years so easily, Michael protested. Dad, please do something. I can't bear to work at a company with him, Hannah pleaded. George looked at Michael intently before speaking quietly. Michael, you'll have to leave. Your obsession with my daughter is abnormal. To prevent the worst-case scenario, it's necessary to separate you and Hannah. No, I refuse to be separated from Hannah, Michael protested. I felt the pathological nature of his obsession with Hannah. George seemed to feel the same and decided to hold off on firing Michael. In a situation that truly embodied the phrase, keep your friends close and your enemies closer, George chose to allow Michael to stay at the company while keeping him at a distance from Hannah. Michael was demoted from sales manager to general affairs manager. Furthermore, the company arranged for him to receive counseling through an affiliated institution, I explained. Initially, Michael resisted and complained, but eventually he began to quietly attend counseling sessions. To inform all employees that Hannah and I were married, George decided to host a grand wedding reception. There, George and I finally had the chance to see Hannah in her wedding dress. Tall and stunning, she looked like a model. At the reception, we were blessed with many well wishes from the employees, and George made a surprising announcement. He declared that I would be appointed as the next CEO during the upcoming personnel changes. I knew about this in advance, but was anxious about the other employees' reactions. When the announcement was made, the room erupted in applause. Moved by emotion, I stood up and gave a greeting. Hannah beside me clapped her hands happily. I renewed my resolve to work hard, especially for her sake. Now widely known as George's daughter, Hannah decided to take a break from the company, determined to have children while still at a safe age. She decided to focus on fertility treatments. With this in mind, we wanted to change our environment and decided to relocate to Australia. Although my days were busy traveling the world as CEO, I made sure to cherish the moments spent just with Hannah. Perhaps due to favorable circumstances, Hannah safely gave birth to a daughter. We named her Amanda. As her parents, I may be biased, but she is a charming child and will likely grow up to be beautiful. George, now her doting grandfather, frequently visited our home in Australia. Hannah seemed happy with her relaxed lifestyle. As for Michael, who had troubled Hannah, it seemed the counseling had worked, as his obsession with her diminished. However, losing his star was a significant sadness that led him to despair. He became reckless as his fantasies about Hannah were denied. Unable to truly love a real-life woman and wanting to fully enjoy the world of Anna, he quit his job. Consequently, he stopped going to counseling and began to revert back to his old lifestyle. Around that time, a character in his favorite anime, voiced by someone with a voice similar to Hannah, became popular. Michael gradually became obsessed with the characters and their voice actors, spending a substantial amount of money. This was similar to his behavior with Hannah, but with a twist. The voice actress, who had a voice similar to Hannah, was not particularly attractive. At the event, after seeing her actual face and style, Michael became completely despondent. He began to withdraw into his home, and his savings started to dwindle. He then shifted his interest to a popular mobile game featuring beautiful characters. To fully enjoy the game, Michael had to spend a significant amount of money, and he became completely addicted. Due to the expenses, he accumulated debts, sold his condominium, and moved into a small apartment. What is important varies from person to person. Michael's choice to spend on virtual characters was his own. However, as he spent all his waking hours playing and participating in various events, no amount of money seemed enough. His quest to perfect his avatar led him into a bottomless pit of spending. Michael was perhaps happiest living in a fantasy world of dreams and illusions. Each time Michael's story comes up, I find myself pondering the nature of human happiness. Time flies, and soon Amanda will be 3 years old. Day by day, she grows more adorable and is the talk of the neighborhood for her beauty. Some celebrities have even suggested she enter the show business world. However, having faced many challenges herself, Hannah is hesitant to involve Amanda in such a world. I share the same opinion and concluded with Amanda that it's best to wait until her intentions become clear. Lately, Hannah has been feeling the urge to return to work. She was indeed vibrant during her time in the sales department. Our company has a daycare which allows mothers with young children to work energetically. Hannah wanted to return to work, and I was happy to support her decision. When she was considering resuming her career, we debated whether to hide the fact that she was the CEO's wife. Given Michael's past behavior, we eventually decided to disclose it and arrange for her to work in our Australian branch. Hannah thrived in her role and seemed truly happy. Seeing the joyful smiles of my wife and daughter has become my greatest joy and purpose in life. The job of a CEO is tough, but as I lead a fulfilling life, I consider myself the happiest person in the world. As I was about to leave the conference room, Emily suddenly exclaimed softly. Her eyes were fixed straight on me while other employees were still around. Emily opened her mouth as if she had made up her mind. Mr. Turner, do you have any time available during your stay in the U.S.? Faced with her imploring look, I was taken aback, but her earnest gaze made me instinctively nod. My name is Adam Turner, 42 years old. I work in ID. Today, I am traveling by plane. I wonder how she's doing right now. Every time I board a plane, I always remember a child. 22 years ago, I was accepted to a university in Japan and was on a plane to move there. A girl about 10 years old was sitting next to me, and next to her, a man who seemed to be her father was struggling to put her to sleep. It's really hard to sleep on planes, isn't it? While empathizing with the girl who couldn't sleep, I spent my time reading a book. Eventually, I started hearing the girl snore, and her father seemed relieved and fell asleep as well. Although I was too excited and hopeful about the new world to feel sleepy, I put on an eye mask to at least rest my eyes. Just then, I heard the sound of sniffles from next to me. Quietly, I took off my eye mask and looked next to me to see the girl silently crying. I was surprised and whispered to her, "What's wrong?" Since everyone else was asleep, I asked her in a hushed tone. "I'm scared," the girl answered in a low voice. "Scared of what?" I asked gently. My brother's surgery. Upon further inquiry, I learned that her brother was undergoing a major operation in Japan, and she was traveling to Japan to be with him. I'd hate for my brother to be gone. This kind-hearted girl was anxious about the possibility of losing her brother if the surgery did not succeed, and this had made it impossible for her to sleep. I tried to offer words of encouragement, but they didn't seem to stop her tears. That's it. I got an idea and rummaged through my bag. Then I pulled out a small game console. "Do you like games?" I asked quietly, and the girl nodded. So I placed the game console in her hands. "Try playing this." She began operating the game console with a look of bewilderment. In fact, this game console was one I had made myself. Ever since middle school, I had dreamed of being involved in game development, and during high school, as I was exploring my career path, a university in Japan became an option. While studying for the entrance exams, I made this small game console. Now the girl was playing on the very first portable game console I had built from parts. It was a very simple shooting game, but she became absorbed in playing it. It seemed to make her tears recede. Since it was simple, she was able to complete it quickly. When she completed it, she turned the screen towards me with a satisfied smile. "What does it say here?" she asked, and I leaned in to look. "My name, Adam Turner. In general, when you complete a game, the names of the staff who worked on it scroll across the screen. I mimicked that and programmed it to display my name when completed. But now that I showed it to the girl again, I felt a bit embarrassed. "Adam is your name, Adam." I blushed a bit again. "Yay, sounds strong, right? It can even beat your brother's illness." I waved my fists around to show her. The girl watched my gesture, and her eyes lit up. "Really? Can it cure his illness?" Her voice was a bit loud, and her father, who had been sleeping next to her, woke up. The father was surprised to see his daughter awake and felt embarrassed that I had been entertaining her, repeating his thanks several times. "It's okay. I was getting bored too." Embarrassed about having woken up, the father readjusted the blanket over his daughter, urging her to go back to sleep quickly. Maybe the gaming made her a bit sleepy. Her eyes grew heavy, and soon she fell asleep. Hours later, she woke up and played with my game again. I was glad to see her so engrossed. Just as the announcement came that the plane was preparing to land, the father nudged the girl, who reluctantly tried to give the game back to me, but I shook my head. "It's fine. Keep it." The father tried to refuse, but the girl looked a bit happy. Her adorable face made me smile. That was the first game I ever made. I'm glad she enjoyed it so much. so please keep it. I said this to the father, then turned to the girl. When your brother gets better, play this game together, okay? With a smile, she nodded vigorously. Thank you. Her sparkling smile gave me courage. This is why I make things that can captivate people. For this, I'll study hard. With such determination and hope in my heart, I parted from the girl and landed in Japan. It seems I've been lost in memory for quite a while. An announcement that we were about to land came over the intercom. I wonder how she's doing now. I don't know the outcome of her brother's surgery, but hopefully he's still living well today. With these thoughts, I disembarked from the plane. I headed for the company at my destination, transferring from train to taxi and safely arriving. As I entered and looked around the lobby, "Oh, excuse me, are you the subcontractor?" a voice called out. I turned to see a young man in his 30s looking at me with a smile. Yes, as I responded with a startled voice, the man hurriedly explained. I'm so sorry. I tried contacting you several times but couldn't get through. I have an urgent meeting now. If we could reschedule our meeting to another day, it would really help me out. I'm really sorry, especially since it's our first meeting. Apparently, this man who kept apologizing had mistaken me for someone else. I was puzzled, but just as I was about to correct him, "Hey, Kevin," a woman's voice echoed in the lobby. Then the man in front of me looked up and turned around. It seems this man was Kevin. I told you I absolutely have to be at today's meeting. As she approached, the woman was using crutches despite the cast on her left leg. She skillfully moved forward with determination. She looked at Kevin with an expression of anger, yet she was incredibly beautiful. Her eyes were wide and doubled with long eyelashes. Her well-shaped eyebrows formed a beautiful arch, adding to her exotic aura. While I was still in shock, a quarrel had already started between Kevin and this woman. "Emily, you just had an accident, right? I told you to take the day off." "I can explain everything since I was involved too," the woman, apparently named Emily, retorted. "It's just a fracture. I said I would crawl if I had to. I was the main developer. I absolutely want to present it myself." "Kevin, you go ahead with the subcontractor meeting as planned." Saying this, Emily looked at me, her eyes widening as she realized who I was, and started to panic despite her crutches. "Mr. Turner, are you here?" I quickly responded, No, you're on crutches. Please, take it easy. Are you all right, though?" I was flustered. Emily shook her head and said, "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine." Then she glared sharply at Kevin. "What are you doing? Greet him. He's Mr. Turner, president from the Japan headquarters." Upon hearing this, Kevin panicked and exclaimed, "What? Mr. Turner from the headquarters?" He turned to me to apologize. "You didn't know his face." "You can't be serious," Emily muttered to Kevin in a low voice. I chuckled. "Don't worry about it. It's only my second time visiting the American branch, and I don't show my face often, so it's natural not to recognize me. But Emily, you seem well informed." When I mentioned this, Emily quickly looked up. "Yes, I've read every interview from start to finish, and have been looking forward to meeting you today," Emily explained. "You started a company with Vice President Aita Suzuki in Japan, and after your game app hit it big, you set up this American branch." My background sparkled with enthusiasm. As Emily mentioned, I had founded an ID company in Japan with Aita, whom I became close to during my university days. We developed several apps and software, and as we continued to grow, one of our games became a hit. Noticing the high number of downloads in the US, Aita, and I decided to establish an American branch a few years ago. "You knew my background so well. You must be a talented employee," I said. I was involved in the interviews when setting up the American branch, but I don't recall Emily and Kevin. After the setup, I entrusted all HR matters to the HR department here. Probably Emily joined us mid-career, but I was pleased that such a dedicated employee had joined us. It's a bit embarrassing, but also very gratifying. Thank you. Are you participating in the competition later? I asked as I prepared to leave, but then paused. Kevin, was it? Even if urgent matters come up, try not to radically change the plans of subcontractors. They are important people involved in our app development. I said this gently with a smile, trying not to apply too much pressure. Kevin turned pale, so I quickly added, I'm not angry personally. I don't feel too important. I maintain a fairly friendly dialogue with the staff, much like Arata, who appointed me president at the Japan headquarters. There isn't a strong sense of hierarchy, especially since neither Arata nor I believe in the absolute authority of superiors. Our company culture in Japan is relatively lenient. I wanted the American branch to have good communication as well, but it tends to become rigid. I left the scene with a smile, trying to mediate the situation. At the subsequent meeting, I was in for a surprise. The American branch was hosting the competition to develop a new game app. All the entries were interesting, but Emily's app was outstanding. I reviewed her profile and found out she had joined just a year ago. Although her previous job was also in ID and details were confidential due to non-disclosure agreements, her skills were proven, and she had a high internal rating within her first year. Unsurprisingly, her app was unanimously chosen as the winner of the competition. We held several meetings, including with Emily, to finalize the details, and then the meeting adjourned. As I was about to leave the conference room, Emily suddenly exclaimed, Several of us stared at Emily's cry. Her eyes were directly fixed on me, and she seemed to struggle with her words, trembling slightly. So I approached her amid other employees. Emily opened her mouth as if gathering all her courage. Mr. Turner, do you have any time during your stay in the U.S.? Faced with her pleading gaze, I felt bewildered. I'd really like to discuss various things with you, Mr. Turner. Could you possibly spare some time for me? Standing there on tenterhooks, I hastened to respond. Some employees murmured that it was inappropriate, but was it really? Of course, I'd definitely like to hear more from such an excellent employee like you. My schedule is packed, but how about tomorrow night? We could celebrate your victory in the competition as well. As I said this, Emily's cheeks flushed. I felt like I had seen that expression somewhere before, unable to recall immediately, and having other appointments. I exchanged contact information with Emily and headed to my next destination. The next day, to celebrate, I reserved a private room at a Mexican restaurant. Taking Emily's critiques into account, I made sure to arrange for an easily accessible seat. It had been a while since I last enjoyed Mexican food. I was more excited than Emily. Sitting down with a nervous look, Emily placed something on the table before even opening the menu. I was taken aback when I saw the object. It was the small game console I had made from parts, the first one I ever crafted in my life. Could it be? As I spoke with a trembling voice, tears welled up in Emily's eyes. I finally found you. My name is Emily, the girl you gave this game to on the airplane. You're Adam, right? Like a broken doll, I nodded vigorously. Emily said thank you for that time. My brother's surgery was successful, and he's still doing well. Her eyes brimming with tears as she smiled, Emily had cherished the game console ever since, often remembering me as a kind brother. She probably remembered me more fondly than I deserved. Inspired at that moment by the fact that I could create a game from scratch, she decided to pursue a similar path. She studied programming and joined an ID company, working relentlessly. On a whim, she searched for my name on the internet, which she had tucked away in her memory. This search hit on my name as the president of an ID company in Japan, receiving interviews. Adam Turner, the name that appeared when she completed the small game. The photo in the interview article matched the face she vaguely remembered. Then she learned about the establishment of the American branch. Since the mid-career hiring was open, I quickly prepared my resume, scheduled an appointment, and got interviewed. Emily said with a charming smile, As just another employee, she thought she'd never catch the eye of the president of the headquarters, so she worked furiously. Then she heard about the competition. Knowing that the president from the headquarters would be visiting, Emily poured all her efforts into developing the app. It was very well done. "So you did it for me. You should have sent an email," I said with a smile. Emily made a face as if the idea were preposterous. Me send an email to the president of the headquarters? I wouldn't dare. And yet here I am asking for a dinner like this. Emily bashfully looked down. I thought about improving communication within the American branch. As I pondered, Emily nervously looked up at me. I might as well say it while I mean it. "I've always had a crush on you, Mr. Turner, ever since I was little." "This little game console gave me courage," Emily continued. It was nice to know that she admired me, but I was surprised that her feelings had developed into a romantic interest. "So if you are currently unattached, would you consider dating me?" Emily interjected. I found myself a bit troubled. "I'm sorry. I did think of you when I got on the plane yesterday, but it was more like wondering if you're doing well or remembering you fondly. It's not the same as the feelings you have for me." I tried to choose my words carefully, but they didn't quite fit right. Besides, you're quite a bit younger than me. I'm an old man, and it might not be a good match. 8 years, as I stuttered and scratched my head. Emily interjected, "Back then, I was just a 10-year-old child, but now I'm 34, and there's only an 8-year age gap between us. It's not that significant. Indeed, when put that way, it might just be 8 years. However, as I still hesitated, Emily looked at me pleadingly. "If you're not seeing anyone, could we at least give it a try? Will you give me a chance?" It was a long-held affection. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to respond. Yet, I am a plain man who has become the president of a Japanese company, but has almost no experience with women. She has idealized the kind brother from the plane too much. She doesn't really know the real me. What if she were to find out and say, "You're not what I expected"? That would hurt me too. How pathetic, I thought to myself. But this is just the way I am after 42 years, and there's nothing I can do about it. Let's start by keeping in touch then. I'll be going back to Japan the day after tomorrow and won't be in America for a while. With the time difference, we might not be able to communicate much during that time. If you feel that the real me is different from the ideal you have, I hope you can gently distance yourself." When I proposed this rather pitiful compromise, Emily burst into tears of joy. I regretted just a little being so kind to her on that plane. I felt guilty for having bound her to me for so long. Months passed, contrary to my expectations that she would give up soon. Emily kept in frequent contact. Our text exchanges were sporadic due to the time difference, but there was no blame. When our schedules aligned, we switched to video calls. I'm not a fan of video calls, even for work. I don't like seeing my own face on the screen, even if it's just a small image. Yet, Emily always says, "handsome," when she sees my face. Every time she says it, I feel embarrassed, but also genuinely pleased. If I look tired, she notices even through the screen and tries to end a call early to let me rest, saying cute things like, "I'll send you some energy." Talking to her isn't very tiring, and despite being 8 years younger, we get along well, gradually. I started to like her. I was slowly falling for her sincere affection. I became desperate to see her. 3 months later, I visited America again. I arrived at night, but Emily came to meet me at the airport. We had dinner together at a restaurant inside the airport, then strolled around a bit. Desperate to touch her, I nervously reached out and took Emily's hand. She was surprised, but then squeezed back firmly. My heart pounded wildly, feeling restless but determined. I led Emily to an observation deck I had researched beforehand, where we could watch airplanes. She came with me, snuggling close. The observation deck was chilly and nearing closing time, so it was sparsely populated. We sat down side by side and watched the planes. "Mr. Turner, Ever since I met you on that plane, I've loved airplanes, she said. She still calls me Mr. Turner. We're not in a relationship, so she makes a point of not mentioning my name. Initially, I felt reassured by that distance, but eventually, I started craving more and felt unsatisfied just being called Mr. Turner. I apologized for something I've been thinking about for a long time, I said. I'm sorry. It's my fault for being kind to you back then, Emily. You've been trapped by me ever since. As I said this, Emily hurriedly tried to argue, but I stopped her. Unless I let go of these feelings, I can't move forward. After realizing how long I've been holding you back, I was nearly crushed by guilt. I underestimated the feelings of a 10-year-old girl, I confessed, looking down. It was all my doing. I just fell for you on my own, Emily murmured, making me smile a bit. As a form of atonement, I've created an app, I said, sending the file to her email address. Would you try it out? Emily nodded and launched the app. It was a nostalgic shooting game, the first shooting game I ever made. Emily had been disappointed that the old console no longer worked, so I revived it as an app. Emily easily completed the game with a few taps. I thought it would be a bit more challenging, she said with a smile, but I looked down. What's wrong? She asked, and I replied without looking up. Just keep looking at the screen, please. After saying that, a small sigh could be heard. I could tell that Emily caught her breath. She must have been captivated by what was now displayed on the app. I did something rather cheesy for me, I said. This screen Emily is looking at right now, it should be displaying, I've decided to come back to America. Will you go out with me, Adam Turner? This message should be appearing along with an image of a bouquet. I had always wanted to return to America. When downloads of our games increased in the U.S., I proposed setting up a U.S. branch. Aita had noticed my secret desire. When I told him about the status of the U.S. branch, he suggested, how about you as the head of the U.S. branch? It was an offer I couldn't refuse. And with a wink, Aita said, You've always wanted to come back, haven't you? Eventually, the decision was made to appoint ARA as president of the Japanese headquarters and a U.S. branch president who was fluent in Japanese as vice president. This was to be announced tomorrow. After presumably reading the message, Emily shook me vigorously, and I reluctantly looked up. The message had already disappeared from the app. How about it? I asked, my face flushed, and Emily hugged me tightly. I'm so happy, really happy. Are you coming back to America? Will you go out with me? She asked, her eyes shining with joy. She had loved me since we were children, and knowing the real me, she was still this happy. It brought me to tears. I wrapped my arms around her back and hugged her tightly. Yes, sorry for making you wait. Thanks for loving me all these years. I'll definitely make you happy. I'll make up for the 22 years and fill them with happiness. Trembling with emotion, I vowed to Emily. Then, Adam, Emily whispered my name in my ear, surprising me. I looked at her face. She was blushing and smiling. I love you. I replied with the same words, I love you too, Emily, as the sound of the airplane taking off filled the air. We shared our first kiss. Years later, I can hear our children playing loudly with their phones in the living room. It seems our son has fallen to the floor, perhaps defeated, as our daughter struggles to snatch the phone from his hand. Their cries of give it here and no way, mingling. Hey, you've had your turn, right? Let her have it. Emily's voice softly scolds our son, silencing him. He seems to have handed over the phone to his sister. Now I can hear our daughter's joyous voice. I'm studying while listening to my family. It's a weekend, and I should be at the office due to some pending cases. But I wanted to be near my family, so I'm working remotely. I'm so glad for this convenient world. As I work with a grin, the door to the study opens. Why not take a break? I made cookies. My ever-beautiful wife, Emily, peeks in. Let's take a break. I've been smelling something sweet and getting hungry. Saying this, I put my computer to sleep and stand up as Emily smoothly enters the study. I kiss her lightly on the forehead, Emily blushing, returning the gesture with a kiss on my cheek. I wonder if I've managed to make her as happy as she has loved me over the years. Whether she knows my faults or not, Emily always shows me a contented smile. With Emily, no matter what uncertainties we face, I know we can overcome them together. I leave the study heading to the living room where our children are waiting.